So I've been living in Australia for over 2 years now, and I've pretty much travelled all over the country. There's only a couple of places that I haven't been. The only places I haven't been in Australia is Melbourne, surprisingly. I haven't been to Canberra, and I haven't been down to Tasmania either. Other than that, I have been to every single state in Australia. And after travelling to lots of places, certain places more than once, I have definitely learned a lot about the places that I do like in Australia and the places that I don't like so much. And I definitely have a list of my favorites and a list of my places which I don't like so much, although that list is nowhere near as long. As well as this, I feel like there's a lot of overrated places in Australia and definitely some underrated places in Australia. I have done a few videos like this, but this is kind of an updated version for 2025 as I'm now back in Australia, and I've been to a few different places and my mind has changed about certain places, which I'll come on to in this video. If you're interested in what I have to say about Australia, then make sure you give the channel a follow, make sure you subscribe, and also give the video a like. And yeah, let's get into it. So let's start off with an updated for 2025 best versus worst places in Australia, and then we'll go on to later some places where my mind has changed and also some places which I do think are overrated or underrated. So first of all, my favorite places in Australia. First of all, let's start off with my favorite city and probably my favorite place I've been to in Australia, and that is Perth. After traveling to many places in Australia and living in lots of different places, it's one of the only places that I actually get the urge to go back to and live. I just loved living in Perth. I think it is exactly my vibe. It's a city, but it's not crazy. Plus you got the amazing nature, the best beaches in Australia, and the whole vibe there is just exactly, for me, what you picture when you picture Australia. The weather is amazing. The best weather in the country is in Perth for sure, because during the summer, if you like sun, it is the best place you can live. And even though it's a city and it's got everything you need, it doesn't give that big city feel like Sydney does, for example. It's a lot more chilled out, feels like a big country town. The scenery and the weather and the lifestyle that you get in Perth, for me, it is the best place in Australia. Definitely the best city, that's for sure. Another city that I actually liked in Australia that, to be honest, I feel like I gave a negative review of after leaving because we didn't actually have the best experience there the second time, and that is Adelaide. Now, for you guys who have watched the channel, you know that we had a bit of a bad experience in Adelaide the second time with jobs, with houses, and overall it gave us this pretty negative view of the place. But a couple of years on now, thinking about Adelaide, I'm not gonna lie, I do kind of remember how much I liked it before them bad experiences. And I honestly think it's one of the best cities in Australia. Again, it depends what you're looking for, but for me, someone who likes not a massive city, somewhere pretty chilled out, also with amazing beaches, it's so good for hikes nearby, and there's just enough to do that it's not boring, but it's not crazy at the same time. And I feel like Adelaide is literally a perfect vibe. If I had to settle in an Australian city with my family, I would 100% choose either Perth or Adelaide for that. I think they're the best cities for kind of a very chilled out life. Yes, they might not be the best, definitely not Adelaide if you're chasing lots of opportunity, but if you're looking for a chilled out vibe and still with amazing scenery, Adelaide is a great option and definitely one of my favorite places in Australia. The next place that I really liked in Australia that a lot of people are surprised by is Darwin. Now, Darwin, for some reason, I loved, and still to this day is one of my favorite places in Australia. It's such a unique vibe up in Darwin, and I think it did help that we were literally just there for a week on a bit of a holiday, because you know it is different if you have bad experiences or you've got to work. It did help that it was a holiday, but personally, I just love Darwin and I think it's such a unique place. For me, Darwin's like nowhere else in Australia. Amazing scenery nearby, amazing tours you can do. And anyone that's not been to Darwin in Australia, I highly recommend it because I would definitely go back. The next two places are where this best places in Australia is updated for 2025, and I did a bit of traveling up the east coast and went to a few places which I'd never been to before. The first one of them was Noosa, and that is such a nice beach town. I think it's one of the best places I've been to, definitely on the east coast. I think it's great for backpackers because it's that kind of vibe, loads of hostels, decent nightlife, the beaches are amazing. But also, if I had to live somewhere, settle down for a few years, Noosa would definitely be high on my list. I think it's such a nice beach town. There's not loads to do, but you are just an hour or two. You're very close to the Sunshine Coast and you're pretty close to Brisbane as well. So it's a good place, I think, if you wanted to live there. And honestly, it was, yeah, one of my favourite places on the East Coast, that's for sure. After Noosa, we went up to Airlie Beach, which again, I think is another one of my favourite places in Australia. It's just such a good vibe. It did help that we did an amazing tour on the Whitsundays, which if you haven't done and you're in Australia, I highly recommend it, because that may be one of the best places I've seen in Australia. But Airlie Beach is such a good vibe. I think if I had to work somewhere for like 3-4 months, that would 100% be on my list. I probably wouldn't live there for years because it is small and there's not that much close by. But if I had to do 3 months at a resort, or just, you know, do like a season somewhere, Airlie Beach would definitely be high on my list because it is such a good vibe. It's touristy, so that you're always going to be meeting people, other backpackers, but it's chilled out enough that it doesn't feel crazy, and you can live a very chilled out life at Airlie Beach, and it's definitely one of my top places on the East Coast. Next, I'm going to talk about some places which I didn't like so much in Australia. Some of them may be a surprise. There's not actually that many places, looking back, that I don't like in Australia. I think Australia is one of my favourite countries I've ever been to, and there's not many places I don't like, but there was a few places which I didn't. The first one being the Gold Coast, or more specifically Surfers Paradise. I can't speak completely for the Gold Coast because I didn't do the whole Gold Coast, you know what I mean? But I did explore a bit. I was staying in Surfers Paradise, which I definitely think didn't help me at all. I think Surfers Paradise is probably the worst place I've been in Australia, to be honest. I think, especially considering the hype it gets. Everyone raves about the Gold Coast, and for me, Surfers Paradise was run down. It was dirty. It felt a bit rough, and the beach wasn't that nice. I didn't like the vibe of Surfers Paradise in particular. But even just going to other places in the Gold Coast, I don't know, I was a bit disappointed. And I think to this day, after traveling to lots of places in Australia, it just confirms for me that there are so many places better than the Gold Coast. And I think a lot of people aspire to move there, but for me, I would never want to live on the Gold Coast. The next place I didn't like was Alice Springs. Now, this was a weird one. I loved my experience there, but I didn't like it as a place, if you know what I mean. We spent about a week in the outback, staying at Alice Springs. We went to Uluru, did some amazing tours and hikes around that area, and I loved my experience. And honestly, that experience being in the outback might be my favorite experience from my whole time in Australia. But Alice Springs is an absolute shithole. It is so run down. The crime there is crazy. There's not many places in Australia at all where I felt unsafe at all, but Alice Springs, we did feel unsafe, especially being with my girlfriend. It's not an ideal place to be when you're with your girlfriend, and the crime that's there, it was rough. And I think, although I loved my experience there, if Alice Springs was anywhere else, like, it would be awful. I think the fact it's in the outback is pretty cool, but as far as towns go in Australia, it was by far the roughest I've seen. I think the crime obviously suggests that as well, but yeah, I didn't like Alice Springs at all. I loved my experience there. It's the opposite to Adelaide. Adelaide, I didn't like my second experience, but I loved the town. Alice Springs, I loved my experience, but the town was absolutely awful. Now, there's also a few places where my mind has changed about them. The first one being Brisbane. Now, Brisbane, I've always liked Brisbane. I always thought it was a very nice city, but I never really had too much time there. The first time I went there, I was actually on my own doing a bit of traveling, and like, when you're on your own, it's kind of hard to make the most of a place. The second time, the weather was terrible, and we were only there for a couple of days over New Year's Eve. And overall, I thought Brisbane was a nice city, but I went back for a third time actually the other week, and honestly, I think Brisbane is, again, a very nice city in Australia. Being there with my girlfriend again, we were able to do so much more and explore the city. And I think we flew from New Zealand, where we've been living in Auckland, and I think maybe it was because we've moved from Auckland, and Auckland is nowhere near as nice, or there's nowhere near as much to do as the Australian cities. Brisbane just felt so nice, and there was just so much to do and good vibes, so many places to eat and drink and activities. And this was in the winter, by the way, and we still had an amazing time. I think this third time in Brisbane was definitely my favourite out of the three. And yeah, my opinion on Brisbane, even though I liked it anyway, has improved a lot. The next place where my mind has changed massively is Cairns, and it's actually the place we're living in right now. We're in Cairns, and the first time we came here, we didn't really like it. I think a big part of that was because we couldn't find any jobs, we couldn't find any houses, and we actually left because it was too hard. We were also staying a bit out of the town, which wasn't in the nicest area. We used to walk from where we were staying to the town, And that was pretty much the whole view we had of Cairns, and we didn't really like it. But after doing some travelling up the east coast this time, we found out that farm work, which we originally intended to do, was quite hard to get, and we ended up moving back to Cairns. And I'm not gonna lie, being back here a second time, it is so much nicer than we remember. It definitely helps that we've got a job and a house within the first week, but we're living in a nice suburb, which definitely helps. And the town just feels so much better. Being back at the right time of year definitely helps, because last time we came in the summer where it's about 50 fucking degrees. Being back at this time of year is the best thing. It is so nice, and my views on Cairns have changed massively. If you'd asked me before, do I like Cairns? I'd say no, not really. If you ask me now, I wouldn't say it's my favourite place in Australia, but I really like it. And to finish up, I'm gonna give you one overrated place in Australia, and unfortunately, that is Sydney. Now, a lot of people mistake overrated for being shit. I'm not saying Sydney is shit at all. People think overrated means bad. It does not. It just means that it's hyped a bit more than it should be. And I do think that's the case with Sydney. I think because it's the most famous place in Australia and it's all you hear about before you move here, it just gets hyped up so much. And whilst I think Sydney is an amazing city, I loved my time there, but is it worth the hype it gets? I would say not, because there is better cities in Australia in my opinion, and there's just better places in Australia, weather-wise, scenery-wise. And as much as Sydney is a very nice city, it probably isn't worth the hype it gets. I preferred cities like Perth for sure, and Adelaide, which definitely don't get the hype Sydney gets. So overrated, yes, but definitely not bad. I did still love Sydney, but maybe it's a bit overhyped. So yeah, there's my opinions updated for 2025 on places in Australia that I've been. I didn't cover everywhere, but they were some of my places that I've been. My favourites, my worst, and also a few places where my mind had changed. Yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments on this one, and I'll see you very soon with another video.